Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Tuesday 2 o'clock webinar on a Wednesday. My name is Chad. I'll be your host today as we discuss terrain and landscaping in Envisioneer again. First off, I want to apologize for yesterday if you did show up for yesterday's seminar. Apologize for the technical difficulties that we ran into, but here we are today. Glad you could join us, and we'll go over the webinar again today. So the ground rules, first off, after the webinar today, just like any other webinar, or if you haven't attended a webinar in the past, what we'll do is open up the question panel in the GoToWebinar portion of the screen where you can type in any questions you might have to do with landscape and terrain, and I will answer those questions live during the webinar. Also, after the webinar, I will be sending out an email that includes a username and password to our webinar archive, as well as a booklet on landscape and terrain that goes over the topics that we cover today, and you can take a look at that booklet on your own time and go through some of the exercises there. So let's go ahead and get started. So what we've got and what you should be able to see on my screen is a beautiful house, and out front we've got a sidewalk and a road attached to the terrain on this house. What I want to show you, I'm just going to flip to the back of the house, and if I just take this view and zoom it down a little bit, what we can see is we've got our terrain at the back of the house up above a walkout basement door. So at the back of this house, what we want to do is kind of create a walkout that we can come out to a ground level at the back of the house. So to do that, since we've got a flat terrain that's sitting up at our essentially our main floor height, what we're going to use is the Plateau Tool. So in today's webinar, we're going to go over the different terrain tools: plateau, hills and valleys, berms and trenches, slope, and we're also going to get into using spot points. And we'll insert some plants and create a flower bed as well. So to start off with this plateau that I want to do at the back, I'm going to come into a 2D view. Now when inserting anything in Envisioneer, we do recommend using the 2D view. Items certainly can be inserted in 3D, but sometimes depending on the view and the angle, that can get difficult and tricky. So within the 2D view here, what I'm going to do with the Plateau tool, so where I want to go is the Terrain tab. I'm going to be dealing mostly today on the Terrain tab found here at the top. We'll also be dealing a little bit with the Landscape tab today. But I want to deal with the Plateau tool, which we can see right here. I'm outlining in pink. That's the Plateau tool, and what we're going to do with that Plateau tool is we're going to define points that create a flat spot of our plateau. So this area here, between the 4 points of my plateau, we're going to make at that height that's going to go down below the house, and then from there our ground will slope up in all directions until it reaches that 0 grade level again. So to do that, just simply left click on that Plateau tool. You can see here we get a dialog that comes up. We've got the opportunity to insert a height. So we can create a plateau that is above the existing terrain, or we can create a plateau that is down below the existing terrain height. If we want to create a plateau below, like we do in this case, what we're going to do is use a negative number so that the plateau goes down. So in this case, I'm going to go down 8 feet. I'm just going to leave this height as is. And the other option we've got here is the zenith slider. So depending on where you slide the slider, it's going to affect the slope of the plateau. So if we want a nice deep slope that kind of comes right into the plateau, we can leave the slider to the left, and that's going to create a nice steep drop. Alternately, if we go to the right end, that's going to create more of a gradual drop down to the terrain. So in this case, that's what I'm going to use. I want to use more of a gradual drop. I'm going to keep that slider more to the right. So then when I click in, click OK, that brings me back into my drawing screen. Now this is where I'm going to define the points of my plateau. So I've got ortho turned off. That's going to allow me to draw at any angle that I want. I don't need to be specific here. It's just my terrain. and I'm just going to create the outline of a box. I don't need to return to my original point. I've selected 4 points. I'm going to right-click and choose the Finish option, and that will automatically close the plateau to my original point. So you can see here we've got the base plateau that I've defined by my points, and then we can also see as I zoom out all of the contour lines that are included as well. So the way the contour lines are working, every 6 inches of elevation difference, it's going to draw in a contour line for me. So we'd have the first 6 inches here, up to 12 inches, 18 inches, 24 inches or 2 feet, 30 inches, 36 inches. Each line represents a different 6-inch increment of grade height. If I just flip to a quick view of the backyard, you can see there my plateau is kind of diving down. It comes from the corner of the garage and down to my 8-foot height down at that lower basement level. So right now I'm in a rendered view. A nice view to use when viewing terrain is the rendered outline, and what that'll do is give kind of a triangulated mesh that we can view, and it just kind of gives a better idea of how the slope is working. So we can see what the Plateau tool does there. Next, I'm just going to flip into a 2D view again. Zoom out to my entire terrain. You can see the terrain is outlined by a green box. We've also got here the road that was shown as well as the sidewalk that was shown. That's what the lines on the front are defining. Next tool I want to use is the Hills and Valleys tool. So this tool right here, we've got the opportunity to put in a single point to define a hill or a valley. So when I left click on that option, it gives me again the same option as the plateau, allows me to insert a height as well as insert or use the zenith slider to specify the grade of our slope, whether it's a steep slope or a gradual slope. Hills, if we want to create a hill, obviously we're going to use a positive number. We're going to create a hill above our current terrain location. If we want to create a valley, that's going to be a negative number, just like we used for our plateau, and that will go down below our current grade location. So in this case, I will create a 5-foot hill. I'm maybe going to make it a little bit steeper this time for the hill. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And I'm just going to left-click a single point down here in the lower right corner. And now I have inserted a hill. So again, we can see our contour lines. Every 6 inches of elevation change, we've got a contour line in there. Now, very similar to the hills and valleys is the berms and trenches option. So here, we've got the berms and trenches option. And what that's going to be is a 2-click process. We're going to create more of a line to show where our berm or our trench is instead of a single point like the hill and valley. So again, when I left click on the berms and trenches, same dialog box comes up where we insert a height and the zenith slider with the slope gradient. In this case, I'm going to insert a 4-foot trench. So again, positive number is going to create a berm for us. A negative number is going to create a trench for us because it will go down below the grade level. So -4 feet, going to create it nice and kind of right in the middle of our zenith slider, and click OK. And I'm going to draw a berm along the left side of my property here. Actually, I guess that's going to be a trench because we made that a negative number. Right-click and finish that up. And again, just pop into a 3D quick view here. And it's a little tough to see, but we can see the berm in here as well as the hill. And again, if I flip to the rendered outline display view, we can see that a little bit better. The hill, the plateau, and the trench that we've inserted. Lastly, another option, one of the tools that we've got available in terrain is the slope tool. So the slope tool we've got here to the right of plateaus, and what that's going to do is slope our entire lot. So what we're going to do is define the length of our slope. So we're going to define a height, and then when we draw the slope in, we'll actually define the length so that we use that length to define the how gradual or how steep our slope goes. So if I click on the slopes tool, we've just got the height option. We've also got an angle option where you can insert the actual angle of the slope. In this case, we're going to deal with the height, and again, I'm going to use a negative number so that we slope down. So my height's going to be -5. You'll notice we don't have the zenith slider because when we draw our slope, that's going to define how gradual our slope is. Click OK. Just in this back corner here, I'm going to do my slope. So you can see as I left click, it starts drawing an arrow for me. So this arrow will define how long or how short our 4-foot or 5-foot drop, I guess in this case, is. So the shorter the arrow, the steeper the slope is going to be. So again, I'm just going to kind of do a gradual slope here and left click, and we can see again how we step down and get down to that 5-foot slope down at the very back corner. Again, if I just kind of go into a 3D view here, you can see how that slope was created in a line. So that would go across the entire terrain as it's got shown. So if you did it straight through the middle of your terrain horizontally, it would create that slope across the entire terrain or the entire lot. Back into 2D, I just want to go over some of the settings here for the contours and for the site or the terrain itself. So under Settings and Program Settings, we've got a terrain option here. So if I click on Terrain, it brings me to my different terrain options. I've got an auto cut terrain option, so we've got the option to set a building location that will cut around the terrain so that we create a hole where our house may be. So we've got the option to select the basement or the ground floor, and when we insert something, an enclosed perimeter of a building onto that location, the terrain will automatically cut around that perimeter of walls that we've got inserted. Also, we've got a length and a width for our terrain. So if you've got a specific lot that's really big or a house that's really big and you need to make your lot or your terrain or your piece of land bigger, in here is where you would do that. You can adjust your length, you can adjust your width, and create a bigger lot using the length and the width. Last thing I want to show here is the contours. So the interval, so we got the option to show the contours or not. So in this case, we are showing the actual contours. We've got it checked. And the interval is set to 6 inches. So like I was describing, each of these lines represents an elevation difference of 6 inches. So if we want to see less contour lines, we don't need to label it quite so much or every so often. What we're going to do is make that 12 inches or 24 inches or whatever your difference may need to be. And when we apply that and click OK, you can see now we've got a lot less contour lines because it's only showing us a contour line for every 12 inches instead of every 6 inches of grade difference. So next what I want to do is go over the spot point tool. So first off, I'm going to just kind of reset this terrain as we've got drawn, as we've used the tools at our disposal. So there we've got it back to a regular terrain. Next thing I want to do is go to the spot points. Now spot points are only available in Envisioneer. If you've got ProArchitect, you won't have the spot point or tin mesh tool available for use that is just an Envisioneer product. So if I click on spot points, what this will allow me to do is insert actual points around the lot and allow me to specify what the actual height of each of those points is. So when I click on spot points, it brings up a little dialog box that says that the current terrain, so the current terrain as it is now, will be converted to a tin mesh, or a triangulated irregular network mesh. And that's just basically a landscaping term that will allow us to define the topography of the actual site. The other thing about this dialog, once converted to a mesh, you will not be able to use the standard terrain tools like slopes, hills, valleys, but you will be able to add spot points. So if I had have created this tin mesh from the original drawing that we had with my berms and my plateau and the hill that I already had inserted, it would include that in the tin mesh and automatically draw that. But I reset that so that we could create the same types of plateaus and hills with the spot point tool. So after this is created as a tin mesh, you won't be able to use the tools that I highlighted earlier either. So we'll go ahead and click OK and convert to a tin mesh. So now what we've got is a spot on our cursor. You can see down below that we've got an XYZ coordinates. So the X and Y will be the 2D coordinates. The Z coordinate will be how deep we want the spot point to go. So what I'm going to do is type in -8 feet. And the key here is to hit the tab key so that we accept that value. And now any spot point that I start to insert will be at that -8 value. Alternatively, you can insert the spot points and then change the elevation after they've been inserted as well. So to create that plateau, I'm just going to insert my multiple spot points that will automatically carve out and create that plateau that I was looking for at the back. So I'll just define my points. So I got 4 points creating my plateau. I'm just going to finish that up and go into my settings. And change my text style to something smaller that's not so huge. And OK, so now we've got everything labeled, and now it's with a nice relative size label. And I can continue putting in the spot points. So again, going down to my Z axis, I'm typing in -8 feet. I'm hitting the tab key to accept that value. And now I can start to put in different levels. Actually, in this case, I want to start putting in a 0 level, tab to accept, and I want to start my slope at this point in the garage. So I'm just going to define the outline of the front of my house with my 0 spot point, so I can start defining where my slope starts and how my plateau is going to look. So if I wanted to create a 0 point at the back here, that anywhere here now that doesn't show contour lines is back to my regular 0 height of grade. You can see the plateau here now and the contour lines based on where my spot points were. It's creating the plateau. If we wanted to create a hill, same thing could apply. If we do a positive number here, 4 foot, and I want to create that hill at 4 feet. Make sure you hit the tab key and create a hill at 4 feet, and you can see what it starts to do to the terrain. So if we go into a 3D view, we can see the plateau as it's been created again, only this time we've used spot points to define the different elevations in the different locations. And there's our rendered outline view. Now that it's a tin mesh, it doesn't show the actual triangulated view, but you can see all of the different contours that are being created here. Next, I'm going to flip over to the Landscape tab and going to use the Fill tool. So the Fill tool is here. Looks like a little man-made small little pond or a little swimming pool. And with that tool, it opens up my catalog to different fills that I can use. In this case, I'm going to grab soil. I'm going to create a tiny little flower bed. Again, recommend doing this in a 2D view, but it certainly can be done in a 3D view, and I will do it in a 3D view here. But I'm just going to define the outline of my fill. And like I said, it can be troublesome in 3D, so we're going to try that again. And right-click Finish there. I've got some soil. I can start a flower bed at the front of my house here. Now that I've got a flower bed in there, we've also got a plant option. So if I click on Plants, this icon right here, it brings up all of the different plants that are available for us to select and use. You can see we've got deciduous trees, coniferous trees, shrubs, flowers, bulbs, all different types of plants that we can insert. I can put ferns, shrubs, anything I want. So as I click on an item, you can see in 3D it is on my cursor. I can left click to place it down. The other option I've got is I can put in my, I can use my arrow keys. So I've got my cursor where I might want to plant. I can use my arrow keys and just scroll through the different plants to see if there's something that I actually want to insert. There's a nice plant that'll fill the center there. I can put that in there. Trees, I can put in a tree if I want. So if I want a tree off to the side, I can put that in there. The other thing about trees is we can set seasonal change to trees and the rest of the plants. If I double click on this plant, we can see we've got the option for the growth as well. So we can set the growth. Right now, this tree is set as if it was 25 years old. We can set it back to a planting age as if it was 6 years old, and you can see that it goes a lot smaller. Or we can go the opposite way and take it up to a full growth age of 60 and see how big that is when it's 60 years old. The other option we've got is up under Insert Terrain, Insert Landscape, Gardening. We've got Plant Seasonal Change as an option. So if I click in there, it brings me into my global settings. I can set where I am in the world, and I can set what day of the year it is. So if I wanted to make this November 2015, see what my trees and plants are going to look like in November, apply that and click OK. So we can see the leaves have all disappeared from all of my plants. So again, that's up under Insert, Landscape, Gardening, and Plant Seasonal Change. Just a matter of selecting the date that you want to use and applying. And there, if we go a little bit more in fall, not so much winter, we can see there's still leaves, but the leaves have changed colors. So that's a quick rundown on inserting soil and plants. The last thing I want to go over today is the option to import site data. So if you've got site data from a surveyor or some other program that you've created the contours of your lot, a lot of those can be brought in and used in the tin mesh and automatically generate the contours of your lot. So the import site data is this option right here. Again, this is only available in Envisioneer products, not with the Pro Architect or Personal Architect product. But if I select on that, it brings up the Terrain Import Wizard, where I can go in and find a data file. So if I go to Browse, I don't actually have any data files on here, but we can see all of the different data file types that can be brought in, whether it's text, comma separated values, GPS exchange, AutoCAD, DXF, or DWG, XYZ or YXZ formats, space delimited point files, Autodesk uploadable file, and northing, easting, and elevation files. So all these different types of files can be brought in and can be used to create your tin and create your site based on data from another program. So just cancel that. When you bring that in, it will give you different options for the data as far as how it was sorted, and it will give you a preview of what your terrain might look like as well. So that is the import option for importing site data. So with that, a quick review, the different options you've got with the tools that you can use in the terrain. So before you convert it to a tin mesh, just the regular terrain tool, you've got the option to insert plateaus, hills and valleys, berms and trenches, and you've also got the slope tool, which will slope your entire lot. We also use spot points to insert individual points, and we can edit the elevation of each of those individual points. And lastly, we inserted soil using the fill tool, and then showed some plants and how we can insert plants and change the size of the plants based on the growth age, as well as change the look of the plants based on the seasonal change that it might be looking at. So with that, I want to open up the question panel. So if you open up the panel on the right-hand side, there is a question section. Feel free to type in any question you might have, and I will do my best to answer it now. And again, as mentioned before, after the webinar, I will send out a booklet as well as a link to the webinar archive. And this video here from today's webinar will get uploaded to that archive so that you can view it. It's probably going to be up there about a week or so. You can view that at your leisure as well. So I don't see any questions in there yet. I'll leave the panel open for another minute or so in case somebody's frantically trying to type in there. But again, just want to apologize for yesterday's mishaps. Glad we could get this GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar scheduled again for today and get it to you and get a video created that we can get it up on the website. So I still don't see any questions. Hopefully that means everything's been explained real well and that everyone understands how the terrain works. So with that, thanks for joining me today on a Wednesday, and hope to see you next Tuesday for our webinar on foundations. Thanks everyone. Bye for now.